Welcome back, my friends of Jump In. It is Moses, your host, once again, here to share with you this week's story. And as you remember, last week I started to tell you my own story, how God called me in a miraculous way to do his work and to save his people. So today I want to continue that story. You remember last week we talked about how my mom put me in the basket in the Nile River, and I ended up going with the Pharaoh's daughter, and I grew up in the Pharaoh's household. And then when I got older, it was the burning bush that God used to call me. Moses, Moses, you will serve my people. Well, today I want to tell you about the special task that God had me do. What happened over the course of time is the Israelites became slaves in Egypt. That's why it was important for me that God had me grow up in the house of Pharaoh. And as God looked at how the Israelites were struggling and suffering as they were slaves in Egypt, God grew terribly concerned and God grew terribly upset. So God called me. Moses, Moses, God said. And I was like, yeah, God? He said, now is the time that you are going to help free the Israelites from their slavery. See, Pharaoh was making it harder and harder on the Israelites. He was doubling their work. They had to make these bricks that would build all the wonders of Egypt. But Pharaoh became so upset with the Israelites, so threatened because there were so many of them. He made them go get their own straw and work harder and harder to the point they couldn't keep up anymore. So Pharaoh was very mean to them, and the Israelites were really hurting. God saw all that, and God said, Moses, you are going to go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. And I said to God, God, why would Pharaoh listen to me? And God said, Moses, I will be with you. I will give you powerful signs so that eventually Pharaoh will have to say yes. I said, come on, God, I'm not the guy for this. What kind of signs could it be? And God said to me, Moses, take your staff. See my trusty staff? And if you throw it on the ground in front of Pharaoh, it'll become a snake. And it did. But Pharaoh wasn't so impressed with the snake. So I went back to God. I said, God, he didn't let my people go after I threw the staff down and it became a snake. And God said, keep going to Pharaoh. I'm going to send 10 plagues. And the 10 plagues will make it harder and harder on Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And eventually, Pharaoh will have to let your people go. So the first plague that God sent is he took the Nile River, and all of a sudden one day it became red like blood. And Moses went to Pharaoh and said, see the wonder that God did? He turned the water red like blood. Let my people go. But Pharaoh said, no, I can't do that. So the next plague was when Pharaoh caused all sorts of frogs, ribbit, 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 jump, 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 ribbit, ribbit, hundreds and thousands of frogs to come all over Egypt. And I said, let my people go. And they said no. So then for the third and the fourth plagues, God said, let there be gnats and flies and bugs and all these things all over. And they came, and I said, let my people go. But Pharaoh wouldn't do it. And the plagues went on and on. Animals became sick. There was thunder, there was hail, there was lightning, there were all sorts of things. But Pharaoh had a hard heart, and Pharaoh wouldn't let the people go. So finally, for the 10th plague, God said, Moses, tell all the people of Israel to go and get a beautiful lamb. It's going to become what we're going to call the Passover lamb. This lamb has to be perfect, no blemishes, has to be fat. And they are to cook the lamb in a special way with a special meal. And they're to take the blood from the lamb and put it all over their doorposts, the edges of their doors. And that will be a sign for the angel that passes over Egypt not to take their firstborn son. So every house of the Egyptian that doesn't have the blood of the Passover lamb on the door, God will take that firstborn son, and eventually Pharaoh will let the people go. So the Israelites and Moses did this. They had the special Passover lamb and the Passover meal. And to this day, the people of God continue to remember the Passover and the Passover lamb and how the blood of the lamb let the people go. Because what happened was, when Pharaoh heard them wailing, when Pharaoh saw the effects of the 10th plague, Pharaoh let my people go. So finally, I took my staff and I led the Israelites out of their slavery from Egypt. And I started them on a long journey that would bring them to a very special place. Next week, I'm going to tell you where our journey left us. But today's message and reminder to us is that when God calls us and asks us to do something, we must always have courage. I was afraid. I didn't think that Pharaoh would ever listen to me. But God promised he would give me his spirit, he would give me his power, and eventually Pharaoh would do what God wanted him to do. And I, even though I was afraid, I had to have that courage, and I did. And what God promised happened. And my people were free. Next week, we'll hear where they went. Bye-bye. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a good jump in.